Hello, I am Alexa Ray Corriea, and this is the Game Maker's Notebook podcast. Today, I have spoken with Jennifer Svedberg-Yen, the lead writer on Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This is Jennifer's first game, but she is a very instinctual writer. So we talked about writing to your instincts, writing the where thing, where ideas come from, how the game is structured, how all those special rug pulls and twists are structured, what the documentation is like. We really dug into everything. This game is so beloved right now. And if you're really interested in how the story was structured, how they wove it together, and where they drew inspiration from, this is a really interesting conversation. Please enjoy.
Rated M for mature.
It's been 67 years since the world broke apart. 67 years since Lumiere was flung into the sea. 67 years since she appeared and painted her first number. Expedition after expedition have tried to stop her. Idealists, fighting for the future of Lumiere. Academics, obsessed with the secrets of the monolith. And those poor souls who just want their deaths to mean something. None have ever returned. And neither will I. But at least I'll have seen something of this world. Seen what lies outside the domes of Lumiere. I'll have walked the path of all the expeditions who came before us. Tomorrow, the paintress will wake. And tomorrow, we sail into the unknown. Even if we fail, we lay the trail for those who come after. We are Expedition 33.
How did you get here? I know this is your first game, but I want the full lore of how you ended up writing Expedition 33.
It's so random. Yeah, people always were like, what? So I guess I've always sort of been writing just for myself privately, just in my own little storybooks and journals. But I guess what really kicked it into, I guess, Expedition 33 was I was browsing Reddit, as one does, during COVID in, like, I think this was around April 2020. And I randomly came across this post from Guillaume in the subreddit Record This for Free, looking for free voice actors for a technical test that he was doing for a game that he was working on. And so it was just very short. I honestly don't think he got that many auditions because he cast me for 2 roles in this initial game that he was working on. And so that's how I met Guillaume. It was through Reddit. And I just want to make it clear, I am not a voice actor. I do not, I am not. People are like, oh, so you started off as a voice actress. I'm like, no. That was literally my first and only voice appearance was in this random technical test trailer demo thing that he was doing for a game that was called We Lost. So that was actually a completely different game set in Victorian England with, it was actually really cool. There were a lot of really cool elements in there. But this was a story that Guillaume had been working on for a while, on his own, and then later on in partnership with Tom Gierman, who is one of the 3 co-founders. So yeah, that's how I first got involved, and we just started talking about the dialogue and the script. And since he's French and I am American, I was offering to help clean up the dialogue a little bit, just also I'm like, oh, maybe she might want to say something like this if that's what she's trying to convey. And then it was just very organically just kind of grew from there, where he told me more about that story that he was working on. Then I asked a lot of questions. I do love asking questions. I think my mom said my first words were like, why?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm just always asking why, and which I think is useful as a writer, right? Like, we always want to know why. Why are they doing this? What's their motivation? Why are they here? Like, what's the point of X, Y, and Z? So it was quite natural during our discussion. We just kind of started discussing more and more, and he invited me to join as a writer. Then fast forward to the end of 2020, I think it was around December 2020. And Guillaume calls me and he's just like, okay, actually reboot. We're just going to start from scratch. Forget what that story we were working on. Because apparently some advisors, investors had told us, like we could think bigger. Because originally we were trying to be very mindful of, the fact that this is probably going to be a very small project with a small number of small team and limited resources. So that was kind of limiting a little bit of how we were thinking about the story. So he said, actually, somebody had said, what if we didn't have to think about constraints? What would we do? What would we want to talk about? Let's start there. And so we're like, okay. Back to the drawing board. A part of me was sort of like annoyed because we had just finished working on the narrative Bible for this other story that I spent months on. And it was like 20, 30 pages or something of like, character timeline, like story arcs and like all the narrative beats. And then, but part of me was also really excited because, because that one was something that Guillaume had been working on for quite some time and I had been contributing to, but this was an opportunity to really start from scratch together. So that was really exciting as well. So we're like, okay, let's do this. And so we started brainstorming new ideas, like new hooks, new things. And that's sort of the beginning of Expedition 33. And at the time, I remember we were thinking about a lot of different possibilities, a lot of different premises and hooks. And I think Guillaume, he really loved this French book called, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Le Horde de Contrevent, or the Windwalkers, or the Hordes of Contrevent, or sorry, I'm definitely butchering the name.
That is okay.
But that was about, a group of people who are going on a mission, on a quest into the unknown to discover kind of the other ends of this large wind tunnel. Or that's my understanding of it. I haven't read it, so if I'm grossly butchering the premise, please forgive me. But essentially it was about a group of expeditioners in that sense. So we really like the idea of a small group venturing out into the unknown. And then separately from that, he had seen, I think, some visuals, some art online that made him think of, a large doomsday clock, perhaps like this giantess, and maybe something to do with, people dying as the doomsday clock ticks down. And we're like, oh, that'd be cool. That was one of many different ideas we were thinking about and kicking around at the time. But the question is, okay, who is she then? Why is she doing this? What is the story behind it? It's a cool visual, but like, what's the story then? And we were kicking around a lot of ideas for that. And it's sort of, we were getting kind of stuck, like nothing really felt like super compelling to us, like it really fit. And around the same time, I actually had been working on this short story privately for myself that was based on a dream that I had. And the dream was about a young woman who lost her mother at an early age. And then later on, she discovers that actually her mother is alive. Her mother is able to enter paintings and travel through paintings and was trapped. And she needed to go into the painting to rescue her mother and bring her back. And various things along with that. And so around that time we were stuck, and I realized, oh, actually this story might work with the premise because, paintings, painters, it might work really well together. And Guillaume's mom actually gave us the final piece. He had asked her, what would be the worst thing that could happen to you? And she said to lose him, to lose any of her children.
Yeah.
And so we thought, oh, that could be the catalyst. That could be the instigating event that really is the reason why the mother went into the painting. And so the mother became Aline, the paintress. The daughter became Maëlle. And then we also added in some more family characters. So the grandfather in my original story became Renoir, the father. And yeah, so that's sort of how all the elements kind of came together. Very
I
random.
No, that's not random. That feels like serendipity, and I feel like this is just like magic. There's a lot of magic in that story, and I feel like games initially were made by people in basements that wanted to make something together. So during the pandemic, like that's very very reminiscent of that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had written you were writing for yourself at this point. So what kind of things did you write for yourself? What were you writing?
Oh, so many random things. So I love science fiction and fantasy. So a lot of it was like it ranged from like very conceptual things, deeply philosophical things, like the nature of creation. What if God was actually a somebody who was in a coma with locked-in syndrome, right? And creating a world in his head, because he's locked in, and then that actually was the beginning of the formation of a universe, things like that. Or
Yeah.
like, what if there's somebody who, like, there's this thing about butterflies in when they are go through their metamorphosis from caterpillar to butterfly. They actually like dissolve inside in their little cocoon
I
and
didn't know
then
that.
like reform into the butterfly. So, what if that was a technology that we could then apply to humans to sort of have rebirth, and you could sort of uh, like like when you get old, you could go through this process and be reborn. And what if this had happened where there was an issue and two people were merged together? What would happen? Things like this. It's like
Ooh.
random what if scenarios, science fiction, fantasy type stuff. And a lot of it was often influenced by my dreams because I have very vivid dreams. And so I would often wake up in the middle of the night and just start writing. Like it's just the words just flow out of my fingertips. And I'm just trying to write down what I encountered in my dream before I forgot it. Sometimes it was cool. I'd look back on it and have no memory of the dream, but I'd read it and I'm like, wow, this is trippy. And other times I'd read it, I'm like, I have no idea what I was trying to say here. This is just gibberish.
Oh my gosh.
But it was fun.
I've never met anyone else that has the vivid dreams that they remember. Um, it sounds like you pull from them a lot when you're writing. That's like your well
Yeah.
of inspiration. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, there are times when I'm like, I have writer's block and I'm stuck for some dialogue where I'm like, this scene isn't working. And then I'll wake up in the middle of the night because I'll have been thinking about it while I'm sleeping. And I'll come up with like, oh, I know how. I know where this scene needs to go, or I know what the entry point into the scene needs to be, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night and start typing. And so there are many scenes that were written in the middle of sleeping.
That's beautiful though. See, that's a writer right there. Um, you mentioned earlier that when you started, you were helping because you're an English speaker and the team was French, that you were helping them clean up dialogue. Expedition 33 is it's very French. It's a very, very French game.
Very
So,
French.
and there's a lot of like, there's like the words sprinkled in and like the sentiments and like the culture. So as a native English speaker, how did you how did you work together? Because I can't tell at all that you were like this was written by a native English speaker. It
An
feels very French.
American.
Yeah, an American. So like what was that process like kind of, like branching those two cultures?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because somebody else asked me this too. And when I think through the script, I don't necessarily think that other than the swear words that we sprinkle in, that there's anything like specifically like French so much as we like really what we were trying to go for was something that was more universal. Like a
Hmm.
lot of the themes, a lot of the feelings, a lot of the expressions it's really more universal. I think where we get a lot of the French influence is a lot of the obviously the set dressing, the mimes, the names of things, sac patats, the
Hmm.
swear words, the putain and the merdes. But in terms of the actual story and the dialogue itself, um, I think it's more universal rather than specifically
Mm.
French, if I had to describe it. Uh,
Yeah, it's definitely. Yes, I definitely think that we look at, the baguette costumes and stuff like that, and it just feels like everything just kind of feels like it's rolled into that. And I like
yeah.
that. I mean, obviously I like it. This is about you. It's not about me. I'm obsessed with this game, but that's why we're here talking today. Um,
Well, I'll
so
also say that I work very closely with Guillaume Broche, who's the creative
yeah,
director, right? So we co-wrote the script together. We like came up with the story together. We work very closely throughout on the narrative, and
yeah.
so I think he probably contributes the unconscious, subconscious French influence, if to the extent that there is any. I think that probably originates in his Frenchiness.
I love that you two made it together. I love to see a creative director and a lead writer like be in sync. So you talk about how your dreams are very inspirational for this, and you and Guillaume have these very, I like to, they might sound weird. We talk about it being weird. There has been a lot of talk in the industry lately. Sam Lake at the GDC Awards in his acceptance speech talked about writing the weird thing, like just doing the thing that you think is unconventional to great result. So my question is, you had this small team, and you and Guillaume had this, very un like this very dreamy, very unconventional vision. So how did you get buy-in from the rest of the team on it? Like, how did you align when you presented it to them? Were there a lot of questions? Like, how did you get everyone behind your vision?
It was all very organic. I don't think anybody
Really?
really.
Okay.
I think everybody was just sort of really like really on board with it. So after I joined, we also then Nicolas, our art director, joined. He's like a freaking genius. Like everything he creates, even his like random short sketches are just beautiful. Like everything is, um, and I think like we sort of landed on Belle Epoque as kind of the setting we wanted. Which made sense. I think before we were working on a game that the previous game was Victorian England. Belle
Yeah.
Epoque is similar around that time period, but it's very French. It's got very strong cultural meaning. It's very rich in just artistic history, music history, and yeah, it was just like a very cool time period. And Nico just went nuts with it, and I think that plus the story, like I think it blended very well together. Same with Lorian, who also just I think he dove right into it. He loved the story, and then like, and there's a lot of I think mutual inspiration that goes on where Lorian might see Nico's artwork and it would inspire him, or he might read
Yeah.
part of the script or part of the story and it inspires this music. Then like we will listen to his music and that'll inspire something that we are writing, or we'll see something from Nico's artwork and that will also inspire another story idea and we work that into the story. So there's a lot of like cross pollination, I'd
Yeah.
say. And yeah, it's interesting. I don't think we ever needed to get buy-in, actually. Just like I
I
think
love
everybody was
that.
on board from the very beginning. I think Francois, who's our lead producer, and Tom, yeah, I feel like everybody was just very like, oh, this is cool. Like this is cool. Let's do this. So yeah, sorry, I don't know if that's like a good answer or not, but
That's a great
we
answer.
didn't
That's
really.
No, that's a great answer. That's the best case scenario, is that your team shares a vision and they share a goal and they're all bought in. Like that is the thing that all developers dream of. So like bless all of you. Like
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. But you also, oh sorry, go
Because
ahead.
because we so I guess like it started with the six of us, right? The three co-founders,
Mhm.
Guillaume, Tom, and Francois. And then it was Lorian, Nicolas, and myself. So we it was originally the six of us before even Sandfall started. Like Sandfall didn't exist at that point. It
Yeah.
was just the six of us randomly sitting in all parts of the world, actually, because I was in Australia at the time. Guillaume was in Shanghai. Tom was in Montpellier. Uh, Francois was in Paris, and Nico was in Belgium, and I think Lorient was just outside. It was in southern France, and so we were all just sort of in our separate little areas and meeting over Zoom and discussing over Discord, and yeah, so I feel like we all sort of locked in very quickly in terms of having a shared kind of, okay, this is cool. This will be a cool story with the cool visuals, with cool music. Like everything just kind of, I don't know, felt very organic in terms of how it evolved. And then afterwards, Sandfall was formed, and then we brought in the first of the team members. I think it was like Alan and Leo. Alan's our brilliant character artist. And I think every single additional person that we brought on, we would do a narrative briefing with them at the very beginning when they start. And we would just walk through the entire story with them. They would also meet with all of the other teams. So everybody did like a little briefing with the new folks. And so I think everyone just sort of locked in very early on. And I think it's just, we explain the story. They're like, oh, that's cool. And then
that's a dream.
We go from there.
That is such a dream.
It really is. It's now that you ask me, and now that I'm talking about it, it does seem kind of magical in a way.
It's very magical.
Pretty crazy, yeah.
And you also you multi-classed a little bit. You did writing, but then you also you were the VO producer, and then you were the localization producer. That's in a game this scale of Clair Obscur, that's not common. So how did you balance that? Like, what was that like for you? How did you make that work?
It also was a bit, it happened very organically. Like I think from writing the dialogue, it became very natural to also be involved in voice recording, just because, they are, that requires the text. In a way, I sort of follow the text throughout the entire process. So the text into the voice recording, into the localization, it's really to in a way ensure like continuity across all the different formats in which the text is expressed in the game. I think so again, this is kind of random. My background, my original career was in finance. So I was originally a private equity investor.
Oh my gosh.
For most of my life.
And now you're in video games.
So that was my yeah. So I did that for like 10 years. I was like, private equity investor. And as part of that, I do a lot of managing different deals and investments where we manage a lot of external service providers. I manage a lot of accountants and lawyers and consultants, and we put together a lot of reports and due diligence and things like that. So all of that actually does translate very well into production side of things.
Yeah.
So it's just project management. So I guess that was another thing where it just was very organic and sort of just made sense for me to pick up. And since I already had a lot of experience, I think, managing projects and managing external service providers, it then became quite sort of a natural fit for me to also work with our voice studios, our localization partners, our LQA partners, to work with voice actors, to negotiate and finalize like the high profile talent contracts and things like that, since that's all stuff that I've done before, just in a very different industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was random. Random is the word.
Random and serendipitous. I'm going to maintain it is serendipity. Yes. So, okay.
Yes,
so now
absolutely.
digging into the story, digging into, how you manage the story. I imagine that this game came with a lot of documentation. How do you, and we like to joke, the writers community likes to joke that, nobody in other departments ever reads our documentation when we write these giant Bibles.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's like, okay. It's real. Girl, it's real.
It is. I was just like, I love my team. They are wonderful. But I also understand that writers love words. Artists don't love words.
No, I literally, no joke. No joke. It's real. I literally passed
I will also say,
go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry.
We're like, no, you go ahead. We're having too much fun. This is too much fun.
I will just say in defense of the wonderful Sandfall team, they are French speakers, and I understand how difficult it is when you are faced with blocks and blocks, pages and pages of text with no pictures. You're just going to be like,
yep.
So I don't blame them at all. And they're all so busy. They have so much to do. So I totally understand. But there was a time when I'm just like, okay, I wrote all of the explanation for these things. I have all this lore. I don't think anybody has read it. I have like the full history of Lumiere, the rise and fall of the expeditions. I have Gustav's family history going back 4 generations.
Oh, wow.
And nobody cares.
I mean, it's not that they don't care. It's that they're like,
no,
I have
I'm just joking.
read? Yeah, but it's real.
Some people did read it. So, and again, like they're so busy. They have so much stuff to do, and I don't blame them at all. But yes, to your point, it's sort of like, I'm writing all this. Does anybody care?
Please read it. I literally,
please read me.
I passed I'm working on a project now, and I passed some documentation, writing lore documentation to a concept artist. And his response to me, because he had asked me a question, his response to me was just like, the Fangorn Forest for concept artists. And I was just like, which is a Lord of the Rings reference. And I was like, what do you mean? Oh, you mean that it is dangerous and there's a lot of it and you're lost. Okay. Well, I still need you to read this because I'm just going to regurgitate the same information that's on this page. Anyway, so documentation, I imagine, it sounds like there was a lot. There's, you have quite a few big twists and turns. You have, the stories in your collectibles. There's a lot going on in Expedition 33.
It's 800 pages of script.
Whoa, really?
For them. And that doesn't include the NPC like gestural dialogue. It includes the main NPCs, but it doesn't include like the gestural dialogues and like all of the other like quests, the Nevron side quests. That's just the main path. There's a lot. And then on top, so obviously I don't expect people to read 800 pages of, script, that's nobody has time for that.
Though.
I get it. But, so the initial narrative Bible that, I put together was a Word doc, right? And it was text based. But, we quickly realized that it would be more effective if I made it a visual PowerPoint presentation instead. So, so then we went to we have a narrative summary, which is a condensed version of the narrative Bible that is has a lot of the beautiful artwork that Nicholas made. So it started off with a lot of the concept art, and then later on, when we actually advanced to the project and had everything actually in game, then we switched to some amazing in-game screenshots and things like that. And I will be honest, I think that enhances the impact of the narrative summary 5,000%, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Like, I mean, I'm a writer, I am biased towards words, but I also realize that in the end of the day, the visuals really can convey so much more, and then I need fewer words to convey. So we ended up with that. And I think that was also like a beautiful thing where we could use the visuals to really help convey the tone and the vibe. And this narrative summary then became the foundational document that we then shared with the voice studio. We shared with the voice actors. We shared with the translators. And that really helped get everybody on board in terms of syncing up what the tone and the vibe is and just getting that across really quickly. So visuals.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Visuals. That's actually a really great hot tip. Making your lore Bible a PowerPoint presentation and not a Confluence Microsoft Word dump.
Yeah. Nobody likes the Word docs. So I still include them as backup for the people who do want them. And I will say, shout out to some of our amazing voice actors who actually, and our voice directors who read the entire thing. And I was not expecting them to read our entire script, just, the parts that they're in. But like, because our script is Hollywood style, like script format. Whereas I know a lot of other games, they have it primarily in Excel or in that format.
The
But
Excel sheet of death.
we wrote ours. Yes.
Yeah.
I just find it really hard to really um, capture everything if it's only in Excel, just in
Yeah.
terms of like the action, like the mood and things like that. So we started off with just Hollywood script format in Google Docs, because that's the easiest for collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And then later I made I made my own little Excel model to convert it into Excel and pull all of those over. That's also where my past Excel knowledge came in handy. And so then we converted it into Google Sheets and Excel and whatnot. Yeah.
Girl, you did it all. You really did. That's wild. So many props to you. Wow. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a lot. That's a lot of work.
It was a
Yeah.
lot of work.
Yeah,
Not gonna lie.
I definitely know what you mean by like you have to having it in script format really gives a bigger impact on everything that's going on. When you just see a bunch of Excel blocks, it kind of diminishes the emotion. Excel is
It's
cold and
harder.
unfeeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just harder to get the feeling of the scene
Yeah.
when it's just blocks and blocks of Excel. And so, yeah, so props to like there were many of our voice actors who read the entire thing and read the lore documents and read the character bios because we had the short character bios in the narrative summary, but I had full blown like I think it was like a 30-page doc of everybody with everybody's like full biographies. Like I
Yeah.
said, Gustav, we go back 4 generations in his family, so you understand where he's coming from and why he is the way that he is. I may have gone a bit overboard, but but for me, it's very helpful because it helps me understand what were the family and friends and personal experiences that shaped this character and why are they the way that they are? Why do they think the way they think? How do they see the world? And because I feel like once I understand where they came from, now I can get into their head. And if I can get into their head and know how they think, then I will also know how they speak and how they will react in any particular situation. So then when I'm writing scenes, it becomes a lot easier to just say, okay, I just let the character react the way they want to react naturally. Because sometimes I find like the hardest is when I really want a scene to go a certain way, but the character wants to go a different way, and then there's just it's difficult, right? But it becomes a lot easier once I started just figuring out the right entry point, and I kind of roughly know where we want them to go, but then I just literally let the characters react to each other. So it's I always say this somewhat as a joke, but not as a joke. Writing to me is an RPG because you are literally role playing every single character and you are letting them react to the catalyst. And if you have the right catalyst, the scene just sort of writes itself. So there are some scenes that like literally it's just, like the bulk of it was written in like 10 minutes, and then it obviously takes time to polish and to, like clean it up and stuff. But the bulk of the heart of it, sometimes it just writes itself and feels like cheating almost. Other times it's much harder though. I don't want it to make it seem like it was so easy. It was not. It was like I have never given birth, but I feel like this is probably akin to that. Sometimes it really felt like, oh my gosh, what a process. So it wasn't all fun and rainbows and super easy. There are hard points as well, but yeah.
Yeah. Writing is never fun and rainbows. It's often very painful.
Yes.
Let's talk about the characters. So what were your inspirations when you were writing them? You have, a very female forward cast, which I really appreciate. But, when you were writing them, did you hear the voice first? Was there someone that you were basing them on? Like, how did you build out that cast? What was that like?
So I feel like there was a back and forth process, right? Like I think first we came up with kind of the core cast and sort of some of the basic characteristics. Some of it came from gameplay, like we knew that Lune was going to have some sort of elemental magic. So I sort of wove that into her background. We knew Mael was going to be there, and that she was going to be the daughter that came into the canvas, and things like that. So we knew various pieces about them, and so then we started that from there, and then we would sort of focus on the outline, what's going to happen to them. And as part of that, I was also working on the character bios and the world building. And frankly, from the world building, also like drawing, like connecting the characters into that world. So, who would Gustav be? Like, what kind of role does he fit in society? And I thought it'd be cool if he was an engineer. Part of this was actually based on again, random. I did this NASA program where I was a analog astronaut. So as part of that, I was locked into a module for 2 months with 3 other crew members. It was just us. We didn't see the outside world. We could only communicate with mission control. We were simulating a mission to an asteroid and back. And so that gave me a lot of ideas about how would a mission be structured. Like if it is a mission into the unknown, it is going to be more research oriented because they need to gather information. So that's one of the reasons why our expedition isn't so much made up of warriors, right? It's not like a team of soldiers. It's actually Gustav's an engineer. Lune is a researcher, and Ciel, she was a farmer and then later became a teacher. Like everybody had like real roles in society. So a lot of that was just thinking through like what kind of folks would live in this society. And it was sort of like a thought experiment in that sense. And then as I was working on their backstories, a lot of times I would pull in a lot of things from my own personal experiences, my own different parts of my own life. So for instance, for Mael, since she's younger, she's 16, and we did want her to feel a little bit more like a loner, separate from the rest of Lumiere, in part because that serves the story, right? Because there is a part of her subconscious that is telling her, wake up, this is not real, you don't belong here. Only she just thinks of it, that gets mixed in with the rest of her feelings of not really belonging. And for that, I drew a lot on my own personal experiences as a teen. A lot of the lines actually come from my own life in that sense, which sounds a little like, but when she says, I just feel like there's something everybody else gets that I just don't like understand, like, and feeling like you never belong. Like that's from my own sort of teens. When Gustav is very idealistic about, trying to do more for the world, and is almost naive in what he thinks is able to achieve at the beginning, and then towards the end becomes a lot more of a realist. That I also drew a lot from my own personal idealism that often, when met with the brutal reality of life, my idealism got kind of crushed. But, things like that. Lune, for example, is also, I drew from like my own academic experiences and also my experiences working in finance and growing up in a Chinese household with a lot of weight of responsibility and expectations. Like Renoir and Aline, it's like a lot of the family conversations we have around, when you care about members of your family and you, I feel like probably a lot of people have had similar conversations with their parents, in terms of they care about you, they want what's best for you, but they don't understand what you are going through, or they have a different perspective on it. And it's all out of love, right? But, and sometimes, your parents will be like, I don't care if you hate me, but I need to do what's best for you. That's my job as a parent. Like that's, I think, universal experience for all. So drew a lot from those kinds of conversations. And Ciel also drew from sort of me in my 30s after I quit finance and was sort of like, I'm free. I'm on the other side of a dark adventure. No, just kidding. So each of the characters like pull from different parts. And obviously Guillaume also like pulling from different parts of his life as well and his experiences. So I think a lot of this was very personal to both of us in terms of where some of the story elements come from. And like I said before, the ultimate, one of the initial like impetuses came from Guillaume's mom in terms of what would be the worst thing that can happen to you, right? And so I think we tapped into a lot into that feeling of how do you handle that experience? And I think all of us have experienced many different forms of grief, whether it's from losing somebody we love and care about. It could also be grief over losing parts of ourselves. Maybe it's losing the ideas we had of who we are. Maybe it's part of growing up and realizing some things, some avenues are cut off to us, that there are some futures we had imagined for ourselves that is not really possible anymore. Or it could be just, like grief can take many forms, and it's not always about people. It can be about many different things. Can also just be about losing friendships and people growing apart. So I think Guillaume and I both tapped into a lot of those feelings and those experiences in our lives and channeled that into the story. Yeah.
Aw, they're such a yeah, they're such a like a very well-rounded, very beautifully diverse cast of characters, both in terms of what they do, like how they play, obviously, but also kind of where they're all coming from into the story. And we see a lot of that in the relationship conversations that you get to have with them,
Yes.
with Verso. So how do you, when you were planning those, how did you map out the escalation of those conversations? Like, how do you decide what kind of interactions characters are having, what information they're revealing as they go? Like, how do you build that escalation in a way that every conversation feels meaningful? Like, how did you map that out?
So we knew we were going to have 7 relationship levels. So I think that helped from the beginning, knowing that there'd be 7. And then we also had this idea that we wanted to tie, unlock some of them later on, that it would unlock a special attack. You'd need to do a little bit of a quest. Because we thought a lot about like, are these just going to be just short interactions? Feels like maybe we want them to actually do something a little bit more, but we also don't have the resources to make this a full-blown, like tons of like interactive games and things like that. At one point we thought about, do we want to add like mini games into these things? And I think ultimately we decided to keep it simpler. And so there would be, mainly it was for production reasons, where it would primarily be these interactive dialogues, maybe a few cutscenes, but not that many, because we were already, we have like 4.5 hours of cutscenes. So we're our cinematics team had a lot on their plate. So we're like, okay, what can we do within these constraints? And so that sort of set up the idea that, okay, we would have 7 relationship levels. Maybe the 6th relationship level would be, a major quest that you could then unlock a skill. And maybe that would be tied to Act 3. So then we knew that like the rest could happen before that, but those pieces would happen after the reveals. That also helped because then we know what we can spoil and what we can't spoil, right? Because that was a big thing about making sure that because players can play it in any sequence, that it still made sense. So for those, I think it started off, I think, with thinking through for each character what makes sense for their emotional arc. Like what really is the central thing that they are grappling with. In a way, it's sort of like once we know who they are, we think about like what will break them and then what will heal them in a way. So we wanted to find like a good arc for that. And so because we wanted the 6th relationship level to be like more meaningful, tied to a quest and tied to unlocking some like a gradient attack. So that naturally felt like that would be the point where you really have the big moment where they confront that major issue about themselves, right? So and then the relationship level 7 would be kind of like the nice like the quiet moment where you bring it all together, where, okay, you've gone through the heavy moment, now it's that resolution. And then we also knew at the very beginning that they're not going to trust Verso. So based on who each character is and their relationship with Verso, how would they start those conversations?
Yeah.
And then you just kind of fill in the middle to kind of reach those points. And so for CL, for instance, we used the idea that she was averse to water because previously she had tried to commit suicide, and so she didn't like the ocean. And that's sort of we used that as the catalyst for the conversation, and then we have the reveals there. For Lune as well, a lot of it is tied to the burden she feels carrying the expectations of her family. And so we tied that to finding the journal from her parents to try to help her unblock or unlock that weight to kind of let herself off the hook. And for Monoko, a big part of this we wanted to explore was the idea of gestural reincarnation. And with Noko having died in the main storyline, the quest to bring him back, and also use that to confront the idea that, you bring back people, but they're not quite the same. And it's sort of like a mirror for Verso, because that was also part of Verso's quest. And ultimately, like, Verso doesn't have his own like level 6 quest that he goes on, but you can see through each of these conversations aspects of his own quest. So with Lune, like the expectations of your parents and what is required of you, what duty do you owe to the people who love you, and what duty do you owe to yourself, and kind of figuring out like at what point is it okay to be a bit more selfish. That is something that both Lune and Verso share. And so, for instance, with Monoko and Noko, that quest line in terms of, bringing back somebody who is not quite the same, that's something they share. With Eskie, it was a little cuter. It was a little bit more fun, like going off in search of this rock that would allow you to, I forget if it was to fly or to like go underwater. It was one of those. And then, it was to go deep underwater. And that quest line, we knew we wanted to touch on Verso's history, like real Verso's history, with Clea. And so that was less so of an Eskie quest and more of a Verso quest in that sense. Yeah. And so all of these things, really, we tried to kind of make sure that it meant something, not just for the main quest receiver, the relationship person, but also for Verso, because that's how they connect to each other, that there is that commonality. Yeah.
So then for the romance options, because you have the CL. Of course, I was going to ask about this. So you have CL and Lune. Obviously, if you choose to romance one or the other, those comments kind of have a little bit of a different flavor to them. But something that I found really interesting about the way that you structured this was there was nothing, like, the game did not indicate to me that this was a possibility. So when it happened, I was like, oh, hell yeah, CL, let's go. It was CL. I romanced CL. But I also did it because she's my girl. She showed up with tarot cards and a crop top. She's my type. So but then I realized that locks you out of Lune, but the game does not message that. So I would love to, from a writer's perspective, why make that decision, like make that more of an organic thing versus here's the gameplay part of it. Like what was that thought process like?
Oh, partially because, choices have consequences. This is part of one of the themes of the game. And, for me, it was sort of, to me, I thought about it always from the standpoint of how would the characters think about this? Yeah. And Lune, if you had already formed a relationship with CL, Lune is not the type of person who's going to be like, all right, let's go. That's just not in character for her. Yeah. And CL, however, is very much at this point, like, this is fun. It's all great. Like, no no real feelings, right? Like she's not going to catch real feelings because her real love is dead. So this is all fun and games. And if Verso wants to be with Lune, that's cool too. Like she would not care. But Lune is not that type of person, right? So
Yeah.
I started from that perspective. It had to be true to who they are. That's also why like CL cuts it off with Verso
Yes.
after she realizes her husband can come back. Because that was not the original intent from the planning perspective. But I was like,
Oh,
no,
really?
no, CL would not continue this relationship. So I was like, no, she's going to cut it off. And so I talked about it with Guillaume. He agreed, and we like made that how things happen. But I think ultimately, I think it was also just more fun not to tell the player that this is something that they have to discover for themselves. You know, it feels a little like cheaper to be like, okay, just FYI, if you do this now, like three relationship levels later, you can't romance Lune. Feels a little bit, it throws you out of the immersion. It doesn't really add that much to the experience. If anything, it detracts from the experience. So it just didn't feel really like the vibe that our game is going for. So I think that was a pretty easy decision for us. I don't think we ever really considered like telling people, by the way, you can't, this blocks you out later. I think it was just, obviously we should let the player play and find out.
We've had a lot of conversations on this podcast about how gamey relationship systems can get. So it is really refreshing to just see something that's like, this is a surprise. Like you can do it. Like it's not. It really does not feel gamey. It feels very, very organic. We
wanted it also to. Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because it also, I think, feels more like real life, right? Like one of the things that I was very sort of cautious about was I didn't really want the relationship dialogues to feel like you said, gamified. Like, oh, if I choose these options, I can unlock this kind of response from this person. It feels a little manipulative in that sense. And I think we wanted to stay away from that level of like you're not in the game anymore. You're like gaming the game. Instead, we wanted people to feel like, like as a character, how would you empathize with this other person? And what kind of response will they have? And so that it's not about manipulating the other person to get a result, to get them to sleep with you or to get them to do whatever, to increase your relationship level. But it's really about listening to the other person and understanding. And I think that's really more like real life as well,
It is. No, you are absolutely correct. I did initially this is like me blowing up myself, but initially when I realized there was a romance system, I was like, why can't I romance Monoko? And then I realized he was the dog. So
well, you romance him. I don't know if you picked up on that, but he does invite you to cuddle at the end.
Yeah, so little spoon.
Yeah, so Monoko. There is that. It's implied. We didn't want to go too ham on it, but it's up to player interpretation, right? Like if players want to interpret it as a cuddle, it is. If players want to interpret it as more than a cuddle, then that's also possible.
All right. So. Yeah, I really enjoyed Monoko. He's one of my favorite characters. I have to ask though, like. The feet thing, like hold on. I promise this is a smart question and not a dumb question. But the narrativization of the way that he collects his powers is he takes the feet from the Nevrons. Like you could have picked anything. It could have been like, oh, he steals the power, he does whatever, but you narrativized it as he takes their feet. And then we have several scenes where he's polishing the feet and holding the feet. So I have to ask, because I love this choice, where did that come from? I love the feet.
That originated with Alan, our character artist, and Guillaume and Nico, our arts director. So I think it was like partially an ongoing joke that Nico doesn't like to draw feet. It's just he feels like it looks a little ugly, looks a little weird.
Lune's feet are out.
Oh,
Lune's
yes.
feet are out, Clea's feet are
For
out,
humans,
feet.
yeah. The humans are great, but for the Nevrons, you'll notice none of the Nevrons have feet. They have like these little peg leg things, right? They just like these long stick like things. And then I think when Nico was designing Minoko, he had this bundle of like sticks on his back, and it was sort of like, oh, those could be feet. Um, and then I don't know, I was not part of this part of the conversation, but somewhere along the way, I think Nico, Alan, Guillaume, probably also the gameplay guys, they decided that it was Minoko was going to be a shapeshifter, and that the feet made sense, peg legs, let's go. I was not part of that. I claim no responsibility for that. You should go ask Nico and Alan. But
Gosh.
I did love it. I loved it so much. So then I took that idea and then I worked it into a lot of the conversations. So the idea
Yes.
about like the relationship where he's polishing the feet,
Mm-hmm.
it's because I loved that. I just love the imagery of it, because, what would you do if you are Minoko and you are fighting and you have these feet and like you have a beautiful collection of Nevron feet? You gotta other people polish their swords. He's gonna
Polishes his
polish
feet.
these feet. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so good.
And then it just became like its own thing, and then we just worked it further and further into the story and into his battle lines. I think he has a battle line. He's like, "Oh, what lovely feet you
What
have!"
lovely feet. Yes, I think I heard. Yes, I heard that battle line
that was
before I
from
knew. Yeah.
I think Red Riding Hood. Oh, what lovely like teeth you have, or what lovely,
Yeah.
But Red Riding Hood, but we make it Minoko. Oh, what lovely feet you have. You know.
I heard that bark before that part was like revealed. So I was just like, oh my God, okay, we're really gonna go here.
Okay.
I love Minoko. He's a phenomenally written character. Speaking of
Oh, I will just say one thing. A lot of people have a misconception. They think that Minoko, the character, the gestural, is named after Minoko, the dog in our office, our happiness manager. That's
yeah.
not actually the case.
Oh.
Minoko, the happiness manager, our dog, was named after the gestural Minoko. So Alan got the dog
Oh.
afterwards. Yeah. And Minoko and Noko are actually named after the Swedish energy drink Noko because
That's amazing.
that started off as an inside joke as well because so Guillaume and Tom met in Sweden actually at Ubisoft's one of Ubisoft's studios
Yeah.
in Malmö in Sweden, and they had a whole fridge of Noko, and I think both of them got addicted to Noko while they were working there. And we were trying to come up with names for characters, and I was just being silly and just teasing them. I'm like, we should just name them Noko and Minoko, and it stuck. And we're like, okay, yeah. There's a lot of things that started off as jokes, and then it just sort of stuck, and then we just went with it, and then it became like Expedition 60 as well. Also started off as a joke, and we're like, we're gonna do it. Yeah, same with the feet thing, the Minoko feet thing. Yeah. A lot of things started off as jokes.
Expedition 60, the Beefcake Expedition. Really incredible. I've read that
with their glorious muscles.
Oh yeah. I read that and immediately thought of like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Like they're just like a bunch of beefcakes like blowing through the world. That stuff like that was really a joy to find. There's a lot of little things like that. I did want to talk about the Justrals though. Like they're such interesting characters, and in a story, in a world where there is a lot of, it's very dark, there's a lot of heavy themes, you have this brightness with the Justrals, and you get to play volleyball with them on the beach and visit where they live, and like it's a really nice break from the darkness of the game without leaving the game. Like it's so beautifully integrated. So what was the inspiration behind them? Did you always feel like, oh, we have to have like, what is our creature, or did someone just randomly come up with something? Like what was their origin?
It's funny, actually, Guillaume and I both came up with it independently, and then we're talking to each other about it. And I was just like, wait a second, like I was thinking of that too. And it was like, so I had the idea that because Aline was a paintress, and she was teaching child Verso how to paint. So he had a lot of his like little toys around, and that in his childhood canvas, he would obviously want to create someone to play with because that's what kids
Yeah.
do, right? We have our little make believe, we have our imaginary friends. I'm like, he needs friends. Baby Verso would have friends in his canvas, right? And then Guillaume separately was also thinking the same thing. He was just like, oh yeah, and also we do need creatures of some sort, to inhabit the world. What is something that it could be? And so then we're like, we were talking about it. And we're like, oh yeah, like I think he was thinking of, the paintbrush set. That Verso would have a lot of paintbrushes around. And so we're like, all right, let's make them like paintbrush little friends that he plays with. And because he's a little boy, he likes to have them like fight each other. And they are like little dueling paintbrushes.
So cute.
And then sort of like went deeper into the story about like, okay, well, how else might child Verso think about this? And I was thinking that, childhood Verso probably doesn't like the idea of death. He doesn't want his friends to die, right?
Yeah.
But as a kid, you might think that, well, beginnings are the most exciting part of an adventure, right? Like new beginnings are so much fun. So how can you have new beginnings while also like allowing your friends to live forever? And that's why he has this reincarnation aspect to it where Gestrels can then be reborn with a lot of the same memories and then be able to go on new adventures from the beginning. And I realized later that I was essentially making Gestrels have a new game plus. That was NG plus for the
Yeah.
Gestrels, essentially. But yeah, that was sort of where that was sort of like the idea came from. Like if I was a kid and I could create whatever I wanted and I love having little friends to play with, how would I think about things? That was sort of how we approached it. And for the Gestrels, a lot of it was also so we came up with that idea, then we unleashed Nico's brilliant mind on it, and Nico just came up with like this amazing Gestrel village with all these different like Gestrels, like the different like kind of places that they could have. And then our quest designer Victor Delard, he is he's so funny, he's so good. He like was responsible for most of the gestural dialogue. So all credit goes to him.
Wow.
Like the vast majority of all those fun little conversations you have, the dancing gestuals, like the "this is fine" fire meme gestural.
Oh, so
like,
good.
Yeah,
So good.
those are all Victor. So everyone send your thanks to him. He is like the gestural meme NPC extraordinaire. And so yeah, like I think it was a lot of like we knew like they would be a hit, right? We knew they'd be fun. We knew they'd be like, like something that that players would find like they could connect to, because it's part of that innocent joy, of being in like a imaginary world where you can do fun things, And my personal favorite are the sack of patats, which stands for sack of potatoes. I think I was so excited when I saw the creatures that Nico had designed and that Alon modeled and made like amazing. By the way, Nico and Alon, like crazy tag team duo. They're so good in terms of like Nico comes up with amazing things and then Alon just makes it even better. It's just awesome. So you guys can thank Victor for those gestural like interactions. All the little fun.
Them.
Yeah,
they're so great.
They're awesome.
I hope there's some gestural merch in our future because I need like 20 of them.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, and speaking of merchants, Noko and Monoko are not the only ones named after Noko in some way. So if you look at the merchants, you might see maybe where their names might have come from.
Other energy drinks, perhaps. That's so funny. That's really funny.
Yes. Yeah. It's
I like that choice. That's
people in the office drink a lot of Noko. They have like a tally sheet that they have like how much people are drinking just to keep track of, ordering and things like that. It's yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, video games, right? I'm going to hard pivot. I want to hard pivot, like really, really hard. I want to talk about the end of Act 1 and the end of Act 2 and how you sort of wrote and structured those. I think, a lot of people have said the choice you make at the end of Act 1 to kill Gustav, to kill the character that we have put so much time and energy into, who we maybe thought was the main character, just kill him and he's gone.
Yeah.
And I want, when did you decide you wanted to do that? What was the conversation like around planning that? And how did you orchestrate that in a way that achieved the emotional impact? So sort of, presenting him over Act 1, and just why decide to just go ahead, kill him, not bring him back? Like Mael doesn't even bring him back when she's bringing everyone like back at the end. Like he is gone. So I want to hear about that creative decision and your thought process behind that.
Okay. So like I said, a lot of things started off as jokes. This started off as a joke. But it started off as a joke, but I will just caveat that we wouldn't have done it if it didn't make sense for the story.
Of course.
So back when we were actually working on the other game, We Lost, I was just joking that Guillaume loves twists so much that I was like, what would be the ultimate twist? Let's just kill our main character in Act 1, like at this point in this particular battle. What if we just killed him? And then Guillaume was just like, wait, actually... And so that was a joke that we then said, actually, that could be really interesting to do. And then when we rebooted, we're like, oh, is this still something that might work in this story? And it did make a lot of sense for Gustav's arc, in terms of he's this idealist who is somewhat naive. And the first time he meets Renoir, the versus the final time he meets Renoir, the fact that, he is Mael's adoptive brother, and the feelings that he has in terms of protecting the future of Lumiere, what he's willing to do for Mael, and also just from Mael's perspective, losing a brother in the canvas, paralleled losing a brother outside the canvas. It made a lot of sense narratively. And we felt we could tell a very complete arc for Gustav in that first act, because he does go on quite a journey. He goes from the shell shock that he has at the very beginning, when he has to brutally confront the realities of the world, that he was a bit too much of an idealist early, and faced with those realities towards the end, really actually accepting that and really understanding, really not understanding. He always understood it, but almost understanding on an even deeper level the idea of, for those who come after. So it was, it made a lot of sense for his story arc. And it also created so many more interesting narrative possibilities in terms of, then we can introduce Verso, then we, what that does for Mael. Because Mael is the hidden main character across the course of the story, right? It's something that you have to discover at the end, but it's really Mael's story, right? And so this really helps catalyze a change for Mael. And I know some people feel like there's no hero's journey in this story, but actually if you follow Mael's point of view, it is a hero's journey for Mael. And this was a major turning point for her. In terms of how she sees herself, how she sees the world, how she sees the mission. And it changes kind of her priorities at that point. So it made a lot of sense from that. And so I think we never really questioned it. We just sort of always just said, this makes sense. Let's lean into it. We're going to go And then I think, one of the things was we knew that we were going to have this bookend, right? We knew that they would meet Mirror Renoir on the beach, Canvas Renoir on the beach the first time where he kills everybody. And we knew that Gustav was going to die from Mirror Canvas Renoir's hand, by his hand at the end. So you have kind of this nice bookend of the first time you meet Mirror Renoir, and then this moment. And what I really love is how brilliantly Guillaume and Nicolas and the rest of the, this is a different Nicolas, by the way, our cinematics Nicolas, and the rest of the cinematics team really did such an amazing, beautiful job with those scenes. And just one thing I particularly love, which was from Nicolas, our cinematic artist. When you hear the cane, Renoir's cane, that like
Yes.
ominous, and you hear that on Dark Shores when you first encounter him, and you hear it again at Seacliff when Gustave's going to die, and I feel like it just sets up the scene so beautifully, and yeah, you get that parallel bookend effect where you start off the game with Mael and Gustave throwing stones, you end with Mael and Gustave throwing stones. This part, so yeah, that was sort of a joke that ended up being actually really meaningful, and
Oh
we
my
went with it.
gosh. Wow. Okay. No, that's really heavy, but I mean, that doesn't seem like a joke anymore. It just seems like an idea.
No. Yeah. And honestly, we would not have put it in if it didn't make sense for the story. And it's
Right,
because
of
it really
course.
does make sense for how the story would go, and for what it would do for narratively for where we could take the story after that.
Yeah.
And then at the end of Act 2, I assume
Yes.
you mean like
The
everybody
rug
dying in the
pull.
Goma. Yeah.
Yeah, just like the rug pull, and then you wake up, as Alicia in the manor. I say rug pull because when I talk to other writers in the community about it, we consistently refer to it as a rug pull because it's like, oh my God, like this is absolutely not what I thought this was. And it's such a bold decision to be like, instead of, kind of breadcrumbing what's happening on the outside with Alicia and kind of continuing on, it feels like a hard stop and really does feel like a entirely new act, a new piece of the story, almost like you've written a duology, like we're reading two different pieces. So obviously, we've talked about, all of your documentation and how like everyone had backstory and you knew you had this family dynamic happening outside the canvas. So how did you go about untangling that idea and structuring it and implementing it? Like, how did you decide, okay, we're gonna just have everyone die, hard cut to the real world, have Clea speak a little bit and go back in? Like, it's all very, it is structured in a way that actually is quite easy to digest, but still very powerful. So I'm very curious about your thought process in building it.
That was actually quite an evolution. And it's really like a big part of that was Guillaume, like in terms of like thinking through like how the flow would work. So I'd say first of all, for like we do breadcrumb throughout the Act 1 and Act 2, the reveal actually. If you go back and play through, like a lot of things have double meanings. And a lot of times when people are saying something, when you first hear it, you think they're talking about the paintress, you think they're talking about something, and it turns out they're actually talking about something else. And so we're I think because we had the entire story mapped out from the beginning, we could really make sure that when we wrote the script and the dialogue, that we could layer in all those extra meanings. Although that did pose a problem for our translators in some instances because
no.
it became difficult sometimes to convey all those layers of meaning in another language, and still like provide the clues and the hints, and all of the connotations that we wanted, which is very interesting actually. Another thing was we kind of again followed the logic of the fact that we knew that Renoir was the one who was actually erasing everybody, and that once you have Aline out of the canvas, the natural course of events is he's going to erase everything. And so that again was just a lot of it was following the logic of what would this character do? We're all rational, smart people. How would they act? And then that made a lot of sense there. The scenes with Clea, actually, we added that in afterwards, actually. Originally, we were cutting straight to the Red Tree, where you have Mael and Verso talking about things. And we didn't want to have like a lot of heavy exposition. We just wanted to kind of roll right into it. And then through context clues, people could hopefully understand what was going on. But we realized afterwards that maybe it was a little bit too hard for some people to piece together right away. And then this is when Guillaume came up with the idea of having a flashback to this sequence with Clea. And so having her as that being able to explain a little bit about what happened. And Clea was a character that we had always wanted to have more of in the game, but unfortunately for production reasons, we had to cut her out. But she was originally supposed to be a much larger presence in the game. So all of that then made sense to actually have her be able to kind of present a little bit what was going on and also give people a glimpse of the outside world. Because that was something we struggled with as well, is like we wanted to be able to convey some things about the external world, but within the game's constraints, you can't really do that. So I think Guillaume came up with a very clever way to structure that and to bring that all together. And so, so that's sort of how it came about.
It's funny you bring up Clea. So in addition to these big story moments, and you have, the story of the Desandre family and everything happening in the canvas, you have a lot of stories that feel they're on the periphery of the main quest, but you learn them through collecting the journals, you learn them through environmental storytelling, through like the narrative design. And one of those stories is the story with Clea and Simon. Like there's a lot of stuff going on that you really like. If you're not paying attention, you could miss it, but when you find it, it's beautiful. Like in when you're in Lumiere, the felled axon, the woman with the city on her back. That when I saw Clea, I was like, wait a minute, she's the thing. And then you learn Renoir painted the axons. It's like, oh my God, he painted his daughter. What a weird way to paint his daughter. Yes. Anyway, you leave a lot for the players to discover on your own, and you trust that they will go after it. But in your writing and a lot of the main dialogue, there are bits and pieces that kind of lead us down this path. For example, there's a conversation with Esquier where Verso says, you're thinking about Julie. And I'm like, who's Julie? And then spent like the whole game being like, where's her journal? I see it in the menu. Where I need to figure out what's going on here. And that like really sparks player curiosity. So how do you decide how to breadcrumb these things versus just being like, if you find it, if you don't, you don't, because Clea and Simon are also secret bosses. So how do you lead players without leading them?
I wish I had like a very like cool like answer for this, but it was like I think a lot was just instinct and just. It's
a good answer.
A lot of it starts with, if these characters knew each other, what would they say in this moment? And also with an idea of all the backstory. So at that point, I had written all of this backstory for Verso in terms of like, how in the initial like search and rescue expeditions, like how might people have perceived him, especially knowing that he's immortal, like somebody's going to get suspicious at some point. What's going to happen? Why did he split with Renoir? Maybe this is part of the reason why he split with Renoir. Like it's a lot of like just thinking through the logic of the storylines, it goes back to why. Like, why would he have done this? Why would he have split away from his father? And the characters, like, what are they thinking at this moment? Like, what are the NPCs thinking? And then taking that back then to Esquier, for instance, and Esquier knows Verso. He knows his history. He will also know the significance of, this burial site. He will also know the significance of his relationships with all these other people. So if I were Esquier and I am a friend of Verso, what might I say that I can also use that might be an interesting clue for other things? So it sort of like was from that standpoint. And I think I'm a big fan of everything being meaningful in some way. Yes. So any details that we have, being able to bring it back later on. I love being able to do that because it feels like a more connected world. So generally speaking, if we're going to mention a thing, then I want it to be a thing that has meaning. And I want it to be a thing that we can come back to or that we have. So yeah, I guess it's just that kind of like feeling where everything should always mean something, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And you and I have talked over the course of this interview. You've mentioned instincts a lot. Like this was an instinct. It was a joke. It was an instinct. And writing to our instincts, I feel like sometimes, as writers, we can self-edit ourselves to death, and we don't really listen to that instinct. So when do you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to run with this instinct versus maybe I need to edit this a little more? How did you learn to trust yourself when you're writing? Because there are
Mm.
quite a few dialogues or conversations in Expedition 33 that feel very instincts driven. The wee woo scene with Esquier,
Yeah,
very
that
instinct.
was me. Yeah.
I think you mentioned in a previous interview you wrote that at in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
A lot of the dialogue between Verso and Minoko also feel very instinctual, and it makes them feel like a real conversation that you would have someone. They don't feel like, I don't know if this would make sense, but they don't feel like video game dialogue. It's just like you're just watching like two people talking. So how do you learn?
Yeah.
How do your instincts play a role in that writing? And how did you learn to just trust yourself, to just go with it?
I don't know if I've necessarily learned to trust myself. I constantly question whether or not this is like, is this
Oh
too much?
no.
Is this okay? Like with the wee woo thing, I was just like, okay, this is probably too silly. Like it's just they're just going wee woo woo wee, and I was like, Guillaume's gonna cut this. Guillaume's gonna be like, no, this is too much. And then like later he's just like, no, it's okay. Yeah, sure. So I'm like, okay, we're keeping it. So I think part of it is I think Guillaume and I like balance each other out so we can check each other's instincts in terms
Yeah.
of does this feel authentic? Does this feel real? Does this feel like it'll work? So I think it's one of the great things about having a writing partner, right? Is somebody who can then uh, gut check you and then tell you, nah, I don't think that's going to work, or yeah, that could work. Sure, why not? So I think that's a big part of it. I rely on Guillaume's instinct to check my instinct, and vice versa. Yeah, beyond that, like honestly, like like I told you earlier, like I am not an expert at all. This is like
I
my
disagree,
first
but
time writing
go ahead.
anything. So I don't really have like a very technical, wonderful answer for this other than um like we try it, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, we change
Yeah.
it.
No,
And I think yeah.
yeah. No, that's a wonderful answer. I literally gave a GDC talk this year about how is the year 2025, about how we have become maybe a little too technical and overly analytical, overly structural when it comes to writing. We need to trust our instincts and the vibes more. So I think that's actually a brilliant answer. And it's really refreshing to talk to another writer who is like, I had a vibe and I ran with it and it turned into something beautiful, because what is art if not vibes? Like just
It
vibes
really
we
is a lot of
had.
vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
It's
a
a
lot of
lot of like
vibes.
just channeling in the moment, like the absurdity of life, just channeling that into our writing and or whatever we're feeling in that moment, just channeling it in. Because for instance, yeah, the wee woo, I was just I was delirious. I get very loopy when I'm like sleep deprived.
Oh
I
no.
just go full silly mode. Ever since college, I think people will attest to this. I just like go loopy and silly. And so wee woo was just I was like, I don't know. I've lost all my words. I've lost all the words. I just wee woo was like what came like I was like I'm so tired. I don't know what to say. So
It's
we
brilliant. I
and
think,
and
yeah.
and it was literally just like a placeholder for the moment. And then I was like, I can't think of anything better. Let's just go with this. And then same with like I think the Minoko's haircut was also just being very silly. Like that one was actually like a lot of it. A lot of it actually comes from my dog.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so, for instance, when I always tell my dog he's the cutest, the sweetest, the smartest, the fluffiest. And so that's also why SK says to Verso that he's the smartest, the strongest, and he has the fluffiest soul. That is actually directly
Oh,
what I say to my dog. And I was just like, what would SK say? I don't know. This is what I would say to my dog. Not that Verso is a dog, but if I have great affection for this like being,
yeah.
like what would I say? Or Verso telling Minoko that he looks like an overgrown mop and that he needs a haircut. that was literally because my dog needed a haircut, and
I
I
love that.
literally say to him that he is an overgrown mop and we need to cut his hair. So that their Somonoko dialogue about haircutting is me telling my dog he needs a haircut.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a lot of like silliness because it's like late at night. I'm like, I don't know what to write. I'm just gonna write this, and then we'll see what Guillaume says, and if he likes it, great, and if he doesn't, we'll write something else. So
but we all loved it, and it's there, and it's like I've seen it on like Etsy t-shirts and memes. Like people
I did
love
not
Obimu.
expect I did not expect that at all. I thought it was just it was cute and silly, but I did not expect it to take on a life of its own. Like I think our fabulous community socials manager B, she put a poll up on like, are you we or are you woo? And it came out like exactly 50%,
I saw that.
50
Yep.
50. We're
Mm-hmm.
like tens of thousands of, I don't know, there's some crazy number of votes. I'm like, this is amazing. We have the best player game base ever. Like, this is so cool. So yeah, that blew my mind. It was cool.
I am very happy for you. I loved that conversation. I do want to talk about the structure of the ending. So that was
Mm.
another the being able to choose between, I'm team Mael or I'm team Verso, and when you fight you get that ending.
Mm.
That was a surprise too, because up to this point, I felt like, we had this surprise additional fight, and then surprise you get to choose who you side with. So when you were writing, when in development, at what point did you think, let's have this split, let's set up the ending so that the players can decide basically who is, no one is right in the situation, but
No.
who gets their happily ever after, who gets to do it? When did you come up with that? How did you decide to structure it? What was the process like?
That was also really early on in the process. I
Oh,
think
okay.
we kind of like just thought it would be really cool if the final showdown wasn't against the big boss, but the final showdown was actually between your main characters. I don't really remember when or where we came up with it actually. I feel like we had something I feel like we had like split ending possibility in We Lost. And so I think we already had the idea that we would have like some sort of like ending choice. And then it just felt very poetic that it would be Mael versus Verso. And
Yeah.
that it sort of parallels the bigger uh, battle between Renoir and Aline. Now at another scale, it's Verso and Mael. It just felt like there's a lot of symmetry. Like I love symmetry. I love symmetry. I love like just like things always having double, triple like meanings. And so I think for both of us, me and Guillaume, it always just sort of felt like, yeah, that seems like, how else would you end this? I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I can't even think of how else we would end it. And the idea being that we really want the players to kind of have to take responsibility in a way for this choice, that the players have gone on this journey. They have received the facts, or at least their understanding of the facts. We've presented all of these perspectives, these issues. They've had a chance to really understand both sides of the discussion, right? And that was very important to us from the very beginning, that this wasn't about good versus evil. This is about people who actually care and who really they have different perspectives, and we really wanted people to be able to understand those perspectives. That nobody's doing bad things for no reason. Nobody's doing it just because they're insanely evil,
Right.
So yeah, so we really want the player to, having gone through all of this and gathered all of this information, for the player with their own personal value system, their own personal perspectives, the path that they have walked in their life, to come to a decision for themselves about what they want to choose, what ending makes sense to them, what ending feels right to them, and it will be different for every person, right? And a lot of it really also comes down to how they choose to interpret certain things about the world, about what's important, And frankly, it comes down to what each person holds dear to themselves. And to me, that's one of the beauties of games, right? Is the interactive aspect of like involving the player in that conversation. And Guillaume and I were very, very like in sync on this from the very beginning, that we don't want to tell the player, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, this is the message to take away, this is what you should learn from this. We really wanted to just raise questions and let the player do the analysis and come to a resolution themselves. And so, yeah, I realize like a lot of what I'm saying is like, oh, we knew this from the start, and oh, we always knew we were going to do this. But
that's great.
Yeah, actually, it is true. Like, I think these are all core elements that we knew from the very beginning, and that Guillaume and I had talked about a lot, about, you know, the fact that we didn't want just, you know, unspeakable evil. We wanted it to be very much more nuanced and very much more like human in that way, like almost like more like a drama. And that's also why our characters are older. Our characters are in their 30s, whereas a lot of JRPGs tend to be more teen focused.
Yes.
And I think it's also because it allows us to really approach this from the perspective of people who have lived in this world for an adult period of time, like to adulthood, right? And I think that it allows us to go to explore different life experiences that people would have had that may be different from somebody. We still have a teen perspective, though. We have Mael as a teen, but we also have, you know, our 30-year-olds, and we also have our Renoir and Aline and their perspective. So that was something we always knew we wanted to do. Yeah.
I love all of that. I love that you all tapped into your instincts and you aligned really early. You all seem like you were on the same wavelength. That really is the dream. You guys are the dream.
Yeah, really but again, I don't want to make it seem like, oh, it was so easy, because the devil's in the details, right?
Of course.
Then it's like, how do you actually implement it? How do you take all these pieces and then actually craft it into the sequence, the flow of events, the particular beats, the particular dialogues. So that was definitely a big learning process, because it was a new process for both me and Guillaume. Neither of us had done this before. So there was a lot of like learning on the fly, and a lot of like, oh my gosh, how do we write ourselves out of this? How do we and it was a very iterative process. I think we had a lot of like levels that we had considered and discarded, and we had a lot of like different versions of, you know, the current levels where we were more ambitious, and then we realized, okay, maybe that was too ambitious, or maybe that is too convoluted and people aren't going to understand. Let's rethink how we would do this. So it was definitely not a straightforward, like straight path from A to Z. There were lots of twists and turns, lots of dead ends. Then we go back and we're like, okay, no, let's think about it differently, or like, how do we do this? And I think we must have rewritten Act 3 like 50 gajillion times. So yeah, it was not like oh yeah, we came up with it and it just came out. But the beginning parts, in terms of like crystallizing around the key ideas, I think that's what's helpful, is like the key pillars were always there from the very beginning. And those were kind of like our guiding, like our North Star in that sense.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad everything clearly turned out excellent. Thank you so much for being so detailed and open and like creatively vulnerable with me today. I really appreciated this talk.
Thank you. This was really fun. I love talking to fellow writers. It's really cool to nerd out over this. So thank you.
Yes, it is. And I'm very excited to see what you do next.
Oh, thank you. Me too.